Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ryan. Today I'm going to be trying something that looks like on paper is probably something that I'm going to like, at least on paper. So I tend to gravitate towards bottles that are, ryes, that have lots of oak influence, that are nice and mature. I mean, some of my favorite bottles include like the Jack Daniel's right here. The twice barreled special release rye from last year, phenomenal. I love the 10-year rye from Michter's, which has tons of oak on it as well. I just love a really good, mature rye that has plenty of oak influence, those brown sugar notes and vanillins and stuff. I'm a sucker for it. So today, we're going to dive into, this is the bourbon, but here's a sample of the brand new toasted Penelope rye. This is getting some great reviews so far. In fact, the San Francisco Spirits competition just gave it a 99 out of 100, a double gold score, which is pretty incredible. So as we know, Penelope means this is MGP. Let me give you some of the details of this bottle. By the way, thanks Thrice. Appreciate your generosity sending me in a sample of yours. I'll go ahead and pour it, and then we'll go over some of the deets here, okay? Let that open up a bit. Now, here's what you need to know. This is 100% rye in the mash. It's all rye. It is 100 proof, so 100, easy to remember. 5-year-old juice, and it was finished in, obviously it was primarily aged in a brand new charred oak barrel, and then it was finished, then rebarreled in a heavy toasted oak barrel. Now, one of the things that Penelope notes on their website is like, they talk about how every barrel is actually kind of different. So you might not get the exact same sip every time you try this whiskey, every time you get a different bottle of it. They noted that some barrels just have their own unique flavors that they impart. And the MSRP going rate for this bottle is $70, which honestly, not too bad considering it's rebarreled 5-year-old rye. Now, I do want to get in on this because I love ryes. Nose on this is bright, floral, and honey notes on the nose. Oh, it's thunder. You hear that? We got a T-storm rolling through right now. Anyways, like I was saying, bright and floral on the nose. I think of honey and lavender on the nose, which I love those things on a whiskey for sure. Now, the nose is really heavy on the rye notes, not super heavy on the oak notes, which I expected to get a lot of brown sugary oaky barrel funk on the nose of a toasted barrel finished rye. But I'm getting on the nose mostly like rye spice, a little bit of that anise note as well, a little honey and lavender. Let's hope that oak comes through big and bold on the palate, or else it will be hard to justify doing a toasting process if you don't really get the influence of that second barrel, right? So let's hope we get some of that on the palate. Cheers. The star of this sip is undoubtedly the rye. Okay, so mature, spicy rye notes from start all the way to finish. It is continuous throughout the entire experience. I get a hit of brown sugar and vanilla right up front on the palate. And in the middle there, I get this, it's kind of nice. It's like this vanilla custard note. It's creamy and thick, but it's not like a deep, dark, rich sweetness like molasses and, maple syrup. It's more like this bright custardy note and lots of vanilla and that minty rye spice just throughout the entire sip, start to finish. And then on into the finish, that's where we sort of revisit that barrel. Okay, we got a quick hit of the brown sugar and some honey and vanilla right up front on the palate. And then you get into those creamy notes alongside the spiciness. But then that finish is where that barrel comes back around. You get a little bit of that warehouse funkiness on the finish, kind of hanging out there. And these dry tannic vanillas on the finish. Now, I'm going to assume that it's because it's 5 years old and it is exclusively rye in the recipe. The grain is all rye. But because of that, this sip is through and through, it is all about the rye. Now, that second barrel, that toasted barrel, the influence of it is just there to accentuate the ryeness. Maybe offset the spiciness with a little bit of those sweet tannic vanillas and sort of give it a little bit of balance. But the star of this show is not the barrel, in my opinion here. This is rye. And that's what this is trying to sell you on, is being a great rye that has all those standard rye notes, but it's just got this thread throughout it of that toasted oaky vanilla barrel. It makes me think of like a dark chocolate candy, right? A bitter dark chocolate candy that has just a little bit of caramel inside of it. It's like that caramel is there to just give you a little bit of a reprieve from what might be an overwhelming amount of bitterness. And it's just there to help offset it a bit so that you can enjoy the dark chocolate without being it so biting, right? The caramels are just cut it a little bit. That's kind of what I feel like the toasted barrel is doing to this rye. This might be a little overwhelming for your palate if it didn't have that second toasted barrel there to help kind of offset what might be a little bit too much for your palate, might be a little bit overwhelming. It's going to give you a little bit of a reprieve from it, cut it back a little bit, offer some dry vanilla and caramel notes in there just to help bring it back down to earth a little bit so that your palate can really enjoy the ryeness. Now, I happen to be a big fan of rye whiskeys. I'm very accustomed to rye, and I really like those spicy notes that you get, spearmints, peppercorn. But if you are not into rye, I would not recommend starting with this. This is like all rye, a little bit of sweetness in there too. That 100% rye in the mash, very, very apparent on the palate. So I think this is one of those sips that's going to be subjective to your palate. It depends heavily on what you like and what you are accustomed to. So if you are a rye lover, I think you're going to enjoy this bottle and what it has to offer. If you are not a rye lover, I would recommend holding off for now. Wait till you sort of accustom yourself to rye spice and the profiles that rye offers, and then visit this bottle after that. A good entry rye would be something like Pikesville from Heaven Hill. Something that has a lot of those bourbon-y qualities, the caramel, the sweet, but it starts to ease you into some of those rye notes as well. Now, I'm going to give this a score per my scale, and like I said, this is the part that is really subjective. It depends on you, it depends on me and my palate, what I like, what you like. So for me and my palate, I'm going to say I'm going to give this a 7.3 because I do love a good rye that's a straight, fastball right down the middle, as one of our patrons likes to describe things. A fastball right down the middle, you know exactly what it is. It's not a bashful. It's not shy about being a rye. And that is what this is. And there are some great ryes out there that are like that. They don't try and do anything fancy. They just say, I am a rye. And then I really like ryes that go the other direction and say, I'm going to be a good rye, but I'm also going to bring something else, a different component to the table that's going to give you a completely different experience. And that's why I really like the twice-barreled Jack Daniel's rye, because there is so much oak. Just tons of oak influence on that sip. Sweet brown sugar all throughout the entirety of it, and it really elevates that sip. The Michter's 10-year rye, same deal. So much oak influence coming from that extra age, which then gives your distillate more contact with the wood, more trips in and out of that red layer of the barrel, grabbing more vanillins and stripping them out of the wood and bringing them back into the whiskey. And I love those notes so much. I feel like this could have done the oak influence, dial that up a little bit more. And maybe it just depends barrel to barrel, like Penelope says on their website. I have heard almost exclusively very positive things about this. And like I said, 7.3 is my score for it. That's actually pretty good. I mean, that's literally as categorized as really good to excellent. Okay, so I really like this. I do kind of wish that the barrel could have gone a little bit further. And maybe it means spending more time in that toasted barrel, maybe having a few extra months in that toasted barrel to impart more of those tannic brown sugars and vanillas. I think that would really elevate this, because right now it's extremely rye forward. And I just want maybe the influence of that barrel to be just a little bit more evident. If we had some more of that second barrel influence be a little bit more apparent on the palate, I think this would easily be an 8 and above. But yeah, the rye spice on this is just a tidal wave. And so I feel like it might have a tendency to override some of those more delicate sweet notes you would get from a toasted barrel. That's why you wait for the tidal wave to subside, and then in the finish, that's where that oak, that barrel influence, that funkiness comes back around, because that wave has come and gone. It started to subside a little bit. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the toasted rye from Penelope. Hey, thanks so much, Thrice, for sending me a sample of yours. I really appreciate your generosity. I will enjoy the rest of this sip before I go live on my other channel. If you enjoyed this video and the feedback that I'm giving on this bottle, hey, let me know by leaving a like in the video. It's the best free way to support the channel, and we would love to meet you in the Discord. We've got a lot of new members over there. Totally free to join, links in the description. And a big shout out to my Patreon supporters who help fund the bottles that I get to pick up and review here on the channel. I really appreciate your support. And if you ever want to get involved in our Patreon group, the events that we do, like our bottle shares and stuff like that, and some of the live stream features, hey, you can join for as little as $1 a month. And that's sort of a very easy entry point into that world. Cheers, my friends. May you live richly and get better with age. And I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.